patience. I don't always drink a smoothie, but when I do it in a whiskey glass.
Hey, naturally. Okay, I do believe we are live.
Indeed, we are.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our show. All of you guys know me, Justice Bartlett. I'm a consciousness provocateur, healer, writer, guide, hypnotherapist. My mission statement for my business, Illumination with Justice, is to communicate with clarity and compassion about the hard, holy, and human. And our guest today, my friend and accomplice, is Greg Friedman. Greg, will you introduce yourself?
Of course. Greg Friedman. I host a show broadcast from Laguna Beach, California on KXFM 1047 called Inner Journey with Greg Friedman. And if I could talk her into it, tune in this Sunday and you're going to hear Justice. And we're going to talk about something really cool that's coming up. Basically, the premise of the show is parallel to how I teach. We introduce people to pathways and possibilities without telling them what to do or how to do it. Because ultimately, if we told you what to do or how to do it, then it's our strength instead of yours. And it needs to be yours because your life, your love, your happiness is your responsibility. And I can introduce you to things, but ultimately what you do with it is your choice.
And pleasure, right? Your responsibility and your pleasure.
Absolutely. It's my passion. One of them.
So we're here today together to talk about snuggling shadow.
So what does that mean when you say that?
Well, it just sounds so fucking friendly, doesn't it?
Yeah, right till you do it. Snuggle a cactus.
Cuddle the cactus. Give it love and kisses. So let's break down what shadow is. We could bring in our good buddy Carl Jung, or Carly Jung, as I wrote in the post, and somebody commented. I had a typo this morning. Like Carly Jung, Carl's younger and wiser, more sassy sister. I was like, oh my god. Fucking love it. She would be the shadow of Carl Jung. She would be like, yeah, like Carly Simon, right? Carly Jung. So Carl Jung developed this term, shadow, to articulate, to describe, to give language, shape, voice to the suppressed parts of our psyche. And what is it that we tend to suppress, Greg?
Well, it's the parts of us that we haven't figured out how to love, how to embrace, because they're usually either what we came into this world with, and I'm going to babble in a side direction for a second. Most people think what we inherit through our DNA are things like our hair color, our basic shape, our skin tones, our eye color, but what they are coming to really understand is that in addition, we come in with ancestral legacy. We come in with the skill set and the trauma and drama of our ancestors. And as we develop ourselves, we take that legacy and we transmute it or we amplify it as is. And in addition to that, we're so fortunate we get to create our own trauma and drama. And therein lies all the little shadowy parts.
I love that you brought the ancestral component into it because it's not something that I was thinking about. I tend to think of it as familial dynamics that will create shadow parts, but ancestral is familial dynamics. It's the
Dr.
there's
Freud.
right? Hello, mommy issues. How are you today? I'm fucking living in her house. Like, now I'm pretty good with my mommy shit, I think. Getting better with my daddy stuff too. Tend to think of it as like components of self that didn't have space for expression, that weren't acknowledged as being valuable, or that were not permissible, either due to emotional volatility within the family unit, or on the opposite end of that spectrum, emotional suppression. So if you grow up in a family system and the modus operandi for dealing with feelings is we don't acknowledge them, we don't talk about them, we don't, they're not there, right? They get swept under the rug. What you learn is that whatever is permissible within that range of expression that is shared within the family system, that's okay. It's okay to be that. It's okay to talk about that. It's okay to feel that way. And whatever is not deemed as permissible within the family unit is kind of interpreted by your brain or by your subconscious even as not being safe, because if it's going to get you rejected, if it's going to get you shunned, if it's going to get you in trouble, then you're going to do your very best to sort of minimize, moderate, and compartmentalize those qualities. And that is where our shadow is birthed.
Absolutely. Two things. One is I want to remind you guys, hey, the more you comment, the better it is for everybody, because what you bring to the table is vital to this process. And it's the things that you were talking about are absolutely 100% valid. And to me, that's almost on the light side, because not permissible is different than having the shit beaten out of you for having those feelings. Different for being verbally abused, denigrated, or being who you are as you are. So you learn to repress, oppress, keep that sucker chained up and in a cage. And most people think, oh, I got it under control. That's okay. I got it buried down here. It's a really common word, buried. It ain't dead. It's volcanic. And what happens is, at some point, that pressure is going to build up because it needs to have a voice. You know it in your soul, and your being needs to express who it is. And if you don't figure out a healthy way to express it, it becomes like a volcano, and it becomes molten, and it incinerates, and it blows up, and it does huge amounts of destruction to yourself and to other people. So if you can acknowledge that it's there, I mean, forget about even making friends with it. Forget about even trying to release some of that pressure. Just acknowledge that it's there. That's the first step.
I'm thinking as you're speaking of addiction, actually, is what's coming to mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because for multiple reasons. One, the first thing that any addict needs to do is to first acknowledge that there is an issue with their relationship with whatever that is, right? It doesn't matter if it's drugs, alcohol, food, sex, cigarettes, whatever it is. You have to acknowledge that its existence in your life is creating strife, is creating a problem. And I'm hearing you kind of describe our relationship with shadow in the same way. Before it can be tended to, before it can be explored or probed or made fucking friends with, right? It has to first be acknowledged that it's there. So the nature of shadow is that it tends to be hidden or buried, right? As you said, I think buried is a beautiful word.
Mm-hmm.
Hidden, obfuscated, right? So I'm curious, how do we locate shadow? How do we know what it is? How do we recognize it? If its nature is hidden, how do we find it? How do we acknowledge it?
Huge question, but I want to back up to something you said because it's really, really important. I used to belong to a sweat lodge where there were a bunch of people in recovery. And I was talking to one old man who spent a good portion of his life in and out of jail, mostly in. And he said, you know, most people think addicts do drugs to get high. Mm. And he said, I didn't. He said, I don't want to talk for everybody else, but I'll tell you for sure I didn't. I did drugs so I didn't have to feel.
Yes.
And I think that speaks to exactly what we're talking about today, is there's all that stuff that's repressed and suppressed. And so instead of, you know, seeing that demon, seeing that barb, seeing that aspect of your being, you inject it with heroin and put it to sleep, at least for a time. And then you distract yourself because then you think it's the addiction. But the addiction is a symptom and it's not the source.
So I can speak specifically and very personally to this subject because I have a publicly admitted history with a certain substance, methamphetamine. I used meth for 7 years from the time I was 17 to 24. And before that, the very first drug I ever dabbled in was a form of speed. So in my conscious mind, as I was using, I liked the feeling of going fast. I liked the feeling of losing weight as a woman who basically had body dysmorphia from the time that I was, like 11 to the time I was in my, oh yeah, it started so young because I grew really fast. Like I developed super fast, and my actual discomfort with my skin was deeper than that, was even more shadow oriented than that. But like I was taller than all the boys in my class by the time I was 11. I had breasts. I had horrible growing pains. Like I did not have a happy relationship with my body. And as many women and girls it doesn't seem to matter, like even from a relative perspective, like we think we're fat. Like we look around at what is shown to us, and so many of us, even when we're not, we think we're fat. So I thought I was, and I loved speed for the reason that it suppressed my appetite and it just naturally and easily kept the weight off. But I also liked the euphoria, and to a degree, I liked the sex. And when I think back, like I loved the communication. Like we would get high and talk for hours. So I've taken my favorite part about doing dope and created a career out of it. Like, I mean, talk about tapping.
Of course you did.
Right? Like, talk about tapping into your shadow and like getting resources from it. But what I can tell you about the nature of the substance itself and the chemical reactions in my body, I was with meth recreating the same chemical environment that I grew up in as a child. My family life was extremely hostile. Both of my parental units had issues with their temper. And so that created this kind of heightened state of arousal, this constant needing to be on alert, this sort of low to high grade fight or flight that was just consistently running in my system. And doing dope recreated that. So it kept that feeling of instability that I associated with being a normal feeling of reality alive. That's when I tried to engage with normal reality before that, like I didn't know how to do it. Like I had no idea. I grew up in a fucking spiritual community in the middle of nowhere. I come to like Bozeman, go into like high school. I'm expecting Saved by the Bell. I'm so bored. Like people were so dumb. I was like, okay, well, what am I gonna do? I'm like, I'm gonna do drugs. That's what I'm gonna do. That's gonna be my escape from what seemed like unbearably painful mundanity. So it wasn't that I was trying to numb it out. It was that I was trying to get reality to speed up to the point of like the intensity from which I was used to already living.
Absolutely understand that. So I wrote an article about this a long time ago. There was a woman that I know who has a hotel in the Bahamas, this gorgeous island called Harbor Island. The sand is pink coral. It's gorgeous. It feels like fresh powder snow.
Mm.
And she came out to visit. We're walking down Main Street in Huntington Beach. There's this truck that is raised up, driving down the street, stereo blaring speed metal.
Mm.
And he literally doubled over. And she didn't understand why. And I said, okay, you have to understand something, that we each have a vibrational level. That guy that had that speed metal going had a vibrational level like this. So when that music matched it, it made it feel like this. It made a sense of calm. Whereas you were already here, and that was so discordant, so abrasive to you, that it was painful. And what I hear you saying is that you had a certain level of that shadow that was looking to be met in resonance and vibration. And drugs was your way to do that. Is that accurate?
I think it is. I certainly couldn't have articulated it like that at any point when I recovered, except for in the last couple of years, as I've come to understand the way that our hormones actually work and the way that the neuroimmunology in specific works. But I do think that, like as Gabor Mate has said, that all addiction has its roots in trauma, and all shadow has its roots in trauma, whether that's the trauma of violation or that's the trauma of suppression. Those are both forms of trauma.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that entirely. Now, that seems like a good place to bring up something that I babble about incessantly. People think more often than not in terms of good, bad, right, and wrong. And they even tend to associate light and shadow as good and bad. What a lot of people don't understand is that trauma is a gift. That trauma, that shadow, is a place that provides an opportunity for us to grow muscles. In the same way that if you go to a gym and you're lifting this heavy weight, that weight contributes to your own muscular structure, the way you pull it, the way you work with it. And you could look at it as a burden, which is understandable. Who wouldn't? Or you could look at it as an opportunity. And if you could see the opportunity in it, then it's not only a less friction-filled event for you, but what we were talking about ultimately is also in relationship, is that if you can see it that way and your partner can, well, you're certainly making it easier for your partner can, then it's easier to hug that cactus.
I think what's fascinating about doing it in partnership, whether it's conscious or unconscious partnership, is our partners will often see things that we don't see about ourselves, because they're in the direct sort of impact in the line of fire, so to speak, of those behaviors that are often driven by our shadow. And there are more and less skillful ways to deal with those shadow behaviors. for example, I think, a lot of it really comes down to how we interface with getting our needs met. And there's no more of an intense kind of dynamic than, like, particularly with a romantic partner, putting them in the line of fire of how do you express, communicate, and get your needs met with that individual. That can come off as clean and very transparent, and everything can sort of just be expressed, or that can come off as coercive and manipulative, depending on our own kind of internal relationship with our needs. Does that make sense?
Can you illustrate it? Can you give me a story around it?
Yes, I can. So in a previous relationship of mine, I'll preface this by saying I am a deeply sensual being. Sexual, yes, but sensual even more so. Like, touch, I don't really resonate with any one of the love languages more than the other, but, like, I am a very touching person. I'm also very I'm conscientious about who I touch and who I let touch me. But in an intimate relationship, if we're together, like, oh my God, it's on. Like, I'm gonna be touching you, I'm gonna be feeding you, I can't fucking control myself. And I love it. It's just the way that I express care. One of my last relationships, he did not like the way that I touched him. And I know, can you believe it, right?
No.
Yeah. How could this be a thing? No, he did not. I couldn't believe it either. I didn't understand it either. But he didn't. And rather than communicate to me directly about what he wanted, how he wanted to be touched, which I tried to encourage him to do, well, how would you like to be touched? He would do this passive aggressive, well, you're an intuitive, you're psychic, you should know. Like, if I have to
really? That's my answer to that.
Yeah.
Grow the fuck up.
If I have to tell you, then it's not. But I think this stands true. I think this is relevant for a lot of other circumstances with people, the way that we expect our loved ones and our closest ones to be able to anticipate our needs and how to meet them specifically without direction, right? I think it happens a lot. It happens a lot.
I think that's something that's worth talking to, but it's a setup. It's like anytime you have expectations of people reading your fucking mind, I don't care if you're a psychic, it ain't gonna happen.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So let's be compassionate to the underlying. This is my thing.
Go ahead, sorry.
Passion for the hard, stupid, and holy, and for the hard and stupid.
Not my best thing. Okay.
I have to go there. It's my mission statement. It's my thing. It's my jam. So at what age is that kind of behavior appropriate to expect the outer world to anticipate your needs?
Are you really posing the question?
Yeah.
Never.
It's not true.
Go ahead.
As an infant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
As pre-verbal.
I thought we were talking about adults. I was
no, because we're talking about shadow, and we're talking about where these shadow behaviors come from.
You're absolutely right. I agree entirely.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's appropriate if you're an infant, if you're a toddler, if you're pre-verbal, to expect the world around you to anticipate your needs because you don't actually have the ability to communicate them. So what I see in this individual in retrospect is that shadow part of him was really expecting me to play mommy to him, was really expecting me to anticipate what his needs were so that he didn't have to voice them, right? So that part of him that wasn't capable of could be placated, essentially. He didn't have to do the work to grow that part up to express what needed to happen for him. because he expected me to placate that part. Does that make
Right,
sense?
and you're referring back to an original sin or original trauma that he then in turn was making your responsibility instead of his own.
Right.
Okay, so all right, let's use that. That's a great example. Because in relationship, he was putting that on you. Now we're talking about how to hug that cactus. So here he is as that cactus. How do you respond to that without becoming codependent or obligatory in your response?
Oof. It's tricky. I don't think I did it very skillfully at the time. Yeah, I don't think I did it very skillfully at the time because of the level of enmeshment that was already present, because my shadow stuff was to enmesh with those around me to assure my acceptance and survival. So what he didn't perceive as being acceptable in me, like I slowly just learned to stifle to make peace within the relationship, to keep the peace within the relationship.
Did it?
No, there was no peace in the relationship. There was this there's this cold sort of passive aggressive undercurrent, because neither one of us were confronting the other about. Neither one of us were truly tending to what we needed to tend to within ourselves, to be able to notice first, to be able to notice what the need was, and then next to be able to communicate it. So we were both kind of blaming each other for not recognizing what our needs were.
So this is very typical in relationship. I love this illustration because what I'm hearing you say is his trigger, and this is very, very common, wound up being the catalyst for your trigger, which is often why people are drawn together so they could work through those triggers. That's one version of a relationship. And the opportunity is there. It doesn't mean that's what you want to necessarily be, because there's another version of a relationship where instead of making it a trigger situation, it's an inspirational situation. But with you guys, that was an opportunity because you had that whole history of being told not to be suppressed, to be oppressed, to be in a certain very specific manner of expression. And he was saying what you were doing naturally didn't work for him.
Right.
So what would have worked for you? Because if you guys are out there listening, please, like I said, comment, but it's important to give these guys some tools too. So what in that situation? Say what?
No comments. Well, I see lots of like emoticons, but no comments. And I wonder if it's because we can't see your comments, or if you guys just aren't commenting. Either way, it's okay. It'd be cool if you commented, because it makes us feel like you're part of the conversation, and and we like that. We like that.
And just let us know you're there. Just do a comment so we know it works, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that would be great if someone could drop a comment so we can tell if the comment section's actually working or not.
Cool.
I have a feeling it might not be. I can't see any.
Shadow.
I can't see any on my feed either, but that's okay. Technology is stupid sometimes.
Okay, so here's where we were. It's that we were talking about that old dynamic that you were in, that relationship you were in.
Yes.
And you were being told what you're doing is wrong, essentially.
Okay, so yes, and it was more subtle than that, because the cues about what I was doing wrong were not only verbal. Although that's a very specific situation where, like, he told me, like, I don't like the way you touch me. How would you like to be touched, love? You should know, you're fucking psychic. Okay, way to like shuffle your need onto me. The other cues That's what that's what I would. That's what current me would say. I would be like, I'm sorry, are you two right now? Like, speak, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so the other dynamics that were present within that were this sort of subtle kind of shaming with coldness, disapproval that came through with snide comments that were disguised as humor or sarcasm.
Oh.
Love that shit, right? Not so much. And then the body language. The body language, I think, even more so than the actual direct communication about what you're doing wrong or what's wrong with you, is so hard because you can feel somatically that someone is closing off to you or is being disapproving of you, right? But you can't actually address the fact because they're not really doing anything. So you're dealing with this subtle dynamic that is not fucking subtle at all, that is being backed up by these sort of more direct forms of sort of disapproval or shaming, however you want to put it. And then the lack of communication, which became really kind of passive aggressive in a lot of ways. So how I would deal with that now, and how I did deal with it occasionally back then, and what was rewarding to me was when I could actually, conscious provocateur, right? When I could actually provoke a reaction out of this man, was always like, I felt deeply rewarded. But then, so then the way that it got turned around on me then, the way the shadow side would come out of that, if I would provoke a reaction, then I got to be accused of being defensive and argumentative. So if I get to the point where I've had enough and I say something real direct and confrontational, I've now become the aggressor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because being aware, sensitive, and I know we have a conversation to have about this some other day, empathic, is that you are full well aware that shit is going down.
Right.
And then you go, hey, look, is anything going on? Are you okay? And the answer is, yeah, I'm fine. Why do you, yeah, nothing. And you're like, fuck that shit. I know something's up because look how you're acting.
Right.
But when you bring it up and the person can't acknowledge it, won't acknowledge it, then it's crazy making. It really does drive people nuts. So
okay,
what do you do?
So this is it. This goes back to, how do you become aware of the parts of yourself that are hidden? By watching your own behaviors in the outer world and watching the behaviors of others and watching your reactions. Because your reaction and what feels like jolting or like disorienting to you is going to actually point you inwards at the need that is not being met.
Absolutely. Now, we have a whole bunch of questions. I'm jazzed that you guys are participating. Thank you. But one thing, I want to get to a tool. One tool. Because if you were in Justice's partner's position and you weren't being touched in the way that's appropriate for you, that's fair. It's okay. We're not all going to receive in the same way that's good for us.
Right.
You go. So instead, this is really important in an argument, in a discussion, in a debate, in bringing up something that's difficult. And it goes like this. I really love it when I'm touched this way, or I feel this way. Because, and I'm talking about this to extend to an argument, because your feelings are inarguable. I'm feeling this, instead of saying you're doing this, instead of saying you're making me feel this way. You just say, I'm feeling this way. You're taking responsibility, it's inarguable, and it allows somebody to go towards you instead of, because you're all up in their grill, wanting to go away from you.
Beautiful.
Do you want to jump into some of this?
I do. I want to read some of them. comments. Gwyneth says, my last relationship, I asked him if he could see anything in me that I was blind to that may be helpful for me to become aware of in terms of our relationship. And he either was too afraid to tell me or couldn't find anything. And I think for me, awareness is a high value and non-negotiable for my relationships now. Beautiful.
I love it. So let me ask you this, Gwyneth. Why were you poking that bear? What were you looking for in asking that question? Because there was something in you that was looking to have that question as a catalyst. What were you trying to create through that question? And we could wait. And it looks like, what is it? Lori also has a really groovy question.
Yes. Lori said, when you speak your needs and they can't or won't try to meet you, they do not have the same level of intimacy that you have cultivated in yourself.
Oof. I like that we both went like this from that question.
It's like, step away from the bear trap. It's, yes. And I think one of the things that is really fundamental in any kind of relationship is a shared set of values. And what I know of you, Lori, because we have a well-established relationship of many years, professionally, is that you are fucking God-blessedly devoted to your inner work. You are so devoted to your inner self. It is beautiful, and it is a rare quality in the world. And to have cultivated the awareness, to be desiring the level of intimacy that you're bringing to yourself, to want that reciprocated and to want to experience that in a mutual way, is only, it's so natural. It's the most natural thing. But we have to be able to look at what these people around us are using their time and their energy and their resources for, and what they're holding as values, and how they're expressing those values both inwardly and outwardly. And sometimes we have to make that very hard call that what is most precious to me, I can't fucking share with this person.
I agree with everything you said. And you have to look at it from my perspective. You also have to see, are they on a path towards self-awareness?
Yes.
It took you how long to develop your own awareness to this point? Let's say that if you have some compassion for them and they are on that path, then you have to allow somebody's eyes to adjust to the brightness of the light. It's not like flicking on a light switch. It's a dimmer switch that gradually gets brighter and brighter. And it's not a straight line. It's a zigzag, and some of those steps are backward. If they're on a path, that connotes a specific way to interact with them and appreciate them. And if they're not, that tells you a whole other set of data.
Yeah, absolutely. Lori says, no, they are not 36 years in. Yeah.
Well, that says volumes when you know them.
Yeah.
Then you have some basic choices, which are, do you stay within the dynamic and get that need met somewhere else? Or do you decide that I can't and I have to step outside of the dynamic because that level of intimacy is such a priority for me? And sorry, I'm a dude. I'm a lot more linear about this shit. So, Gwyneth responded to it. Go ahead.
I think that's so viable. It's just practical. It's just practical. The thing that I hate about inner work, particularly when it has that sort of law of attraction spin, is that if you work enough on yourself, that it's going to change the environment around you. That somehow your inner work will be able to change the inner qualities and values and the inner systems of those around you. And it's not going to happen.
Cannot stress that enough. The environment isn't going to change. The only thing that will change is your perspective on the environment. That's it. That's what inner work does. Is it doesn't change anything exterior. It just changes how you dance with it. You want to respond? Go ahead. I'm sorry, but
we asked Gwyneth you asked Gwyneth what she was wanting.
Mm-hmm.
She said she was desiring a deeper connection with her partner. So asking him to share what he noticed in her that she may not have been aware of was her attempt of creating a space of deeper connection with him.
And what do you think about that?
What do I think about that?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the word that comes to mind is trap.
I was going to go set up, but okay.
Yeah, set up.
Yeah. Yeah. So elaborate, if you would, please.
So the way that I see it as a trap or setup, to use your word, is that if this person had been able to speak something that you yourself were not aware of, it would not necessarily be bringing awareness to that part of yourself. What I get the sense of is it would more likely have triggered some kind of defense mechanism within the relationship, that it would have had an adverse reaction to going deeper, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to me, it was almost like it was designed to put distance, to put separation. And what I mean by that, Gwyneth, is that you don't ask somebody to look for the shit in you. Yeah. That's going to come up naturally and appropriately. Instead, if you want to reach towards something or somebody, you just go towards them. What would you want from them? What would be more intimate with him mean to you? And then if you could answer that question, then you could design the bridge towards one another a little bit more easily, instead of looking for all those things that separate you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a great question, the mirror of that question would be, what can I do that will allow you to feel closer to me?
Yeah. Or again, just asking that for yourself. What would make me feel closer to him?
Yeah.
And then communicating that, going, look, hey, look, you know what? I like it when we're about to get off the phone and you say something sweet to me. That's as simple as that. And then that gives them an opportunity, not an obligation, but now at least they have knowledge, but don't have an expectation or a bar of a connection to that.
Right.
You also have to let go of it once it's put out there.
Right.
But the more you communicate, the more you get to recognize if they're interested and or capable of showing up in a way that feeds you.
So I will speak to that of this last dynamic. I had a really intense, this was his decision. He did something very dangerous and very toxic. And we were at a point in our relationship where we really seriously should have been broken up. And I asked one of those stupid leading questions. I was like, is set up, trap myself. I asked him, about this dangerous, dumb, fucking toxic thing he did. I was like, is this a result of where we are at in our relationship dynamic? And of course, he was just looking for the out. He took the out, jumped both feet in, like, yes, it is. And so, of course, I personalize that, right? It's like, it's not about the dynamic, which I actually asked, is this about where we're at? I made that very personal to me. It's like, oh, this is my fault. right? And for me, that led directly into those shadow places where that youngest part of myself was watching people around me do very toxic, crazy, dangerous things and feeling like I needed to be able to do something about it, even though as a child it was nowhere near my responsibility. So those leading questions, those traps, are actually really great opportunities to also once again become aware of what is the need within ourselves, as long as we don't get too worked up in the outer dynamic that's playing out. And I did. And it's like when people are putting themselves in danger, it's hard not to. When people are putting other people in danger, it's hard not to. You have to actually address like the safety factor first before you can go in and like tend to your inner child and do your inner work. You actually have to create a safe space for that part of you to be able to come out. And if you're in a volatile dynamic, that's not going to be a thing. That is not an appropriate time to try to coax your inner child out and to try to see what sensitive need is not being met by this fucking toxic, crazy person. It's not the appropriate timing for that. The appropriate timing is to take actions, measures in the outer world to make sure that you're actually first and primarily safe.
See, now, I think that was a great illustration. He did something stupid. We don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. He did something stupid, and you essentially, out of, in my opinion, from where I'm sitting, you could tell me I'm loony, 2 reasons. One is childhood patterns, and 2 is really subconsciously with a desire to blow this shit up and end it. You said, is this my responsibility? Knowing on an unconscious, subconscious level that absolutely he wasn't going to take any personal responsibility because he hadn't in the past. So now you knew he was going to project this onto you. And now it's leading to its ultimate demise, which really at that point, some part of you must have wanted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And wasn't sure how to extricate myself. I think the other place where shadow winds up playing into our intimate dynamics is with the societal expectations that we internalize. So one of the societal expectations that gets internalized around romantic partnership, probably a lot of kinds of partnership, honestly, is longevity as opposed to the healthiness quotient, right? The more successful a relationship is the longer it's gone on. So this relationship that I had been in, it had gone on for 9 years. So I was invested. We almost got married. Like I had deep investment in making this work. And if it meant that I needed to take full responsibility because I was the only one who was doing anything to try to make it work, then I was willing to do that, which is never going to work, right?
Say that again. That's really, really important.
It's never going to work.
It's never, ever going to work. If there are 2 people in the relationship, there's 3 entities in the relationship that need to be working. There's you, there's the other person, and the relationship itself is a living, breathing entity that needs to be nurtured, nourished, fed, watered, loved.
Talk, guys, so I can melt. There's a comment down there you should respond to.
Yeah.
My whole body is like, oh my God, yes.
Too funny. You are too funny. Read Sandy's, will you?
Okay. Thanks for that. I am aware avoidant, and I'm
with an aware avoidant.
I'm with an aware avoidant, and I'm an aware anxious. We've both been highly sensitive, but sometimes reactive in our own ways. How to start authentically becoming more vulnerable. Boy, you've chosen like one of the hardest dynamics to work that out in, and I respect the fuck out of you for putting yourself in that. But there is
Buckle up, baby.
yeah, there's a difference between being aware of it and not being aware. If both of you are aware, then you can, and you're sensitive, then you can monitor the anxiety both individually and shared, and the impact that you're having on each other's nervous systems. I would say your goal right now is, rather than to focus on vulnerability, to actually focus on stable ways to learn how to co-regulate.
Elaborate on that if you would, because I have an answer for her as well, but I'd like to hear more about co-regulating.
So we don't, our nervous systems are designed to function with other people. Our nervous systems do not develop in isolation, they develop in family systems. So whatever is running through your nervous system that is feeding into your attachment style is something that comes from where you came from. So you are not going to be able to completely change the way that your nervous system interacts with other nervous systems on your own. We actually need we need to learn how to co-regulate, and particularly in relationship. So I would say, regardless of him being anxious, of you being anxious and him being avoidant, which is usually how it goes, what is actually happening between the two of you is anxiety. And because you're a woman, your tendency is to move into your anxiety, not away from it. And because he's a man, his tendency is to move away from his anxiety and not into it. To acknowledge the thing that is actually taking up space between your relationship is actually a shared state of anxiety, and to recognize that this shared anxiety and the way that you're relating to it individually and together needs to be shifted. It needs to be acknowledged in both of you, and you need to create that. I mean, I can see it. I can like psychically see it, like in the relationship space. Like it looks like a little electric charge, right? So it's like where you want to step into this space and you want your nervous system to feel smooth and supported. What's happening instead is it's getting catalyzed, like that deeper place of anxiety. So I would focus right now, rather than the vulnerability component. I think that will come naturally as you feel less anxious, as you actually become more effective at co-regulating together. How can you physically support each other's nervous systems? So when you're feeling anxious, what is it that you need, and how can he support you? Because I'll tell you, an aware, conscious man at any level, he wants to support you. And even I had a recent experience with someone who I think was probably on that avoidance spectrum, but they were really good at showing up for my anxiety. They were actually really good about it. But the way that I had to actually do it was just to put it out there, like, I feel anxious. You have to name the thing that's creating the kind of the push-pull dynamic. And for both of you, it's anxiety.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say that you are phenomenal at being authentic. And you've told me that you weren't always this way. And that's important for people to know, that it was a progression into this place. You speak to your needs, you speak to your anxiety, you let people know where you are, what's going on, but it wasn't always that way.
No.
It had to have a process. That's one thing. Sandy, I got to tell you straight up that you know this stuff about yourself and your partner is huge. Then also, Rumi said that the wound is the place where the light gets in. And I love that, because for you, I would go, all right, so look, I chose this partner so I could address this issue within myself. So if you know that this is going on with you, then it's like, okay, what am I looking to accomplish for myself? What am I looking to heal? What am I looking to to strengthen in myself by choosing this dynamic, because you are choosing this for a purpose. We always do, we're just not always aware of it. So it becomes more about, wow, this guy being this way drives me fucking crazy, and it's such a gift. Wait, what? Fucking asshole. God damn it, thank you. And that's what I'm saying, is that right now, this is an opportunity for you. So there is a part of you, and you could probably speak to this way better than I can, because aware anxious, I'd say, is something that is a component of your being even today.
Absolutely.
So what have you done through your partners being avoidant that has helped you address that anxiety and not become a slave to it, but instead be a co-collaborator with it? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So there have been several key steps in this process for me. One of them is recognizing and actually stopping to call anxiety, and I started calling it what it fucking is. It's PTSD. So when I'm feeling anxious, I'm having a PTSD response. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to my current circumstances. It can be tied to past stuff that my body is bringing up for me to process with. If I can recognize that underneath that anxiety, that underneath that PTSD response there is a part of me that is emerging, that is asking to be held and seen and cared for. The next step that I took to tending to that was that I started referring to it as this thing that wants to be seen as just vivid and tender. It's just so fucking vivid, and it's so tender. It's blowing up my nervous system right now.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And so what I do with it, Sandy, is very similar to what Justice is talking about. I look at it as though it's a 5-year-old child that's anxious.
Yes.
And then I get to tend to that child, because we aren't going to be as nasty, mean, cruel, inconsiderate to a 5-year-old, any 5-year-old, as we would to our adult selves, sadly.
Right.
So if we could recognize that 5-year-old that exists in us with that PTSD, with that trauma, then we could be compassionate. We can be a little bit more nurturing instead of denigrating. And instead of going, oh my God, baby, I'm sorry, what's going on? And you really talk to her. I'm not just talking about playing with it or imagining it. I'm saying absolutely. I've had clients, and I literally have them bring the kid out in the room, and we all have a dialogue. And it's ridiculous how incredibly expedient that process is into finding compassion for yourself, finding love for yourself. And in doing that alone, that anxiety is not going to necessarily go poof, but it's certainly not going to be as ramped up. It's not going to be DEFCON 4 anymore. Now, it's something where I can interact with it without being overwhelmed by it.
So I have an anecdote for that. Sandy says, LOL, I'll unpack that. Yes, it's a PTSD response to abandonment. That is so valid, babe, and that's what mine comes from too. My inner child, great conversation. So I was feeling a lot of anxiety in relation to the concept of commitment last year. And as I was working through this one day, I think I was out at the hot springs. I think I was in a sauna and my feet up against the cedar wall. And that's another great thing, like learn some actual physiological tools that can help alleviate anxiety. Like getting your feet above your head is one of them. It drops your blood pressure. Another one is like the breathing practice, longer exhales than inhales. So you take like 5 deep breaths, make 4 of those breaths really long, extensive exhales, because that helps to regulate your vagus nerve. So I'm doing this out at the hot springs. I've got this internal vision come through. of this child, and I felt her. I was this child on this rock in this raging river, and it was insane. I was like, oh my God, I can't leave her out there. Shit, what am I gonna do? Oh, I'm sorry, honey. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take my adult self into the water and I'm gonna go get this little girl. The beautiful thing was, when my adult self stepped into that river, it was calm. It was like hip deep, just the mildest kind of current, easily navigable. But to a child who had been left alone on the rock in the middle of a river, it seemed like a raging death trap. So my adult self goes out to this rock, peels her little cold, frozen, frightened fingers from gripping this fucking thing for as long as she's been alive off of the rock, and gets her to wrap around me. And I take her back to, the shallow water, and I lay her in the water, and I place my hand under the center of her back, and I just let her float there. And I just let that feeling come through my body of me and my inner child, of supporting my inner child, just floating in this conscious stream. Because what she experienced of commitment, her anxiety of commitment, which was crazy people never doing what they said they were going to fucking do when she was young, was not what my adult self is able to navigate. So this inner child work and the symbolic nature of it is so powerful, and it really can be so immediate, because what we're also doing in that anxious state is we're searching for an answer for something. And if we're in partnership, particularly with an avoidant, we're searching for that answer within our partner, and our partner is avoiding being that answer, which gives us the opportunity to return that attention to ourselves and to take care of that vivid little tender need.
Absolutely. And that doesn't take away from you going, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, just do it, because that's
right.
The little kid too. But the little kid needs you. And the best way for you to show up is in consideration of that child. Yeah. And it's so gorgeous. And if you think that story that Justice told is distant from you, think about going back to a grade school. And it was huge when you were a kid. Now it's this tiny little building. And it's the same thing. Those things that are huge to us as children, as adults, they're much smaller. But if we keep the perspective of the child into adulthood, it will always be this mountain instead of this little hill that we could easily walk up. We might even enjoy the stroll.
Well, and that's such a wonderful and direct correlation with how the shadow functions, because the shadow, as I see it, it is like that inner child that needed to dissociate for whatever reason, grew a protector in that moment, and that protector is your shadow. So it's that it took on the qualities that child needed. And sometimes those qualities get distorted because the child isn't skillful in instructing the psyche how to operate on its behalf. It can only work with what it's got at its
working from a trauma response.
It's working from a trauma response. Exactly.
Yeah. And so it is vital for us ultimately to understand a few things as we progress. That shadow isn't anything bad. That shadow is powerful. That shadow kept us safe, or at least made us feel safe for a long, long time. So now, instead of trying to kill it off because we don't need it anymore, instead, I always suggest that we go to that shadow and we have a conversation and say something to the effect of, you're a fucking rock star. You've done your job so well that you've made that job no longer necessary. So we're not going to fire you, because with all that strength, why would we fire you? What we're going to do is we're going to promote you, and we're going to make that strength work in a different arena. Now you have to choose where you want to put that energy, because it's for you, not against you, and it always has been. And we don't always realize that in the middle of it.
Yeah, our defensive strategies are trying to protect us. Even the concept of self-sabotage becomes it becomes moot, really, when taken in this regard, because we begin to understand that the only reason we would prevent ourselves from moving forward into what we think we want is either it's not what we actually want, or there is a part of us that is preventing us from moving forward so it doesn't get left behind.
Right. And that speaks to your story about the relationship and provoking that kind of event. It's because on some level we know. On some level we always know. And the idea is to trust us enough to let us out. Just be you. And I'm not saying, again, like the light switch, don't turn on a blinding light all at once. Be you to the degree that's okay for you. Test it out. I'm a moron. I jump in the deep end before I look to see if there's any water in the pool. But you don't instead, if it's more comfortable for you to put a toe in the water, put a toe in the water. See it how it is for that big toe to be authentically you. How's it feel with the water? Is it cool to the touch? Is it warm? Is it still? Is it rushing? Really feel into how it feels to be you to the degree that's appropriate for you. That's it. So do you guys have any more questions for us before we start to wrap it up? While that's going on, I'm very fortunate because Justice and I began to work together very, very recently. And I get to reap the benefits of all of the work that you've done. So when we're working together and you say, hey, look, I need this, I go, wow, I am so ecstatic, because when she clearly communicates to me as a man in this world, it helps immensely. When guys are very linear, if you say, hey, I need A, B, C, and D, it gives us an opportunity. Most men, not all men, most men really want to be of service to the feminine. And if you are clear, you're not only giving him an opportunity, you're giving yourself an opportunity, first, to receive, second, to see if somebody is going to show up and be a partner. And that's huge. And that helps you not decide against the other person, but for you, for your own life, for your own courage.
And the beautiful thing is like, as we become more considerate with our needs, we get to see who is capable of considering our needs in that same way, in that reciprocity. And the more skillful we become at tending to our needs, the less charge we can have around, okay, this person's not going to be able to show up and meet this need in this way. And I don't have to demonize them for it. I don't have to make them a bad person. I don't have to project all of my own shadow, unresolved, nobody ever shows up and pays attention to or cares for and loves me stuff onto this person, because I am showing up and I am paying attention and I am caring for myself. And because I am I'm a mature being, I get to choose who I engage with. I don't have to simply accept what I'm attracted to initially, because I may be attracted to things that actually instigate those deeper feelings of insecurity and unworthiness, and I can choose not to engage with them. I may attract a lot of, I've attracted a ton of harassment, and I choose the level that I engage with it. Where it becomes less victimy, where it becomes more empowered, is where we know ourselves well enough to know what we are consciously saying yes to in ourselves. We also get to consciously say like yes or no to in the outer world.
Absolutely. I want to go back to something you said because it ties into a lot of other components of this discussion. You said we don't have to demonize the other person. And the more that we recognize ourselves, the less our tendency is going to demonize the other person. And then, therefore, we can live in acceptance. That doesn't mean because we accept them as they are, that we need to interact with them. One of my favorite things that I'll say when I'm ready to step into a different place is it's a Tupac saying. Tupac said, just because I don't want you to eat at my table doesn't mean I don't want you to eat. I'm bigger than that.
Yeah.
And it's like we don't have to stick with it to make it work because I put in 6 months, 1 year, 20 years, 40 years, for whatever it is. We can accept because there's so much misery that's caused in this world, one-on-one, with ourselves, and with the world at large, that is directly attributed to suppression of reality, the denial of what is. If you accept what is, you could choose how to navigate in a way that's appropriate for you. And that means accepting what is in who you are and how you operate, and accepting how others do as well. Then you get to choose. And because you don't want to stand next to them, doesn't mean that they have to be Satan. They could just not be appropriate for you to dance with. And it just means maybe it's not appropriate for me to be interacting with here and now. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in 20 minutes or a year or 12 years? But right now, I'm choosing for me because ultimately, this moment is the opportunity for a choice. No other moment.
Beautiful. I like that. That's something that you've said to me several times, that we're never guaranteed the next dance.
Right.
And whereas I don't like that crazy sense of pressure and urgency, like running around and telling everybody how important they are to me every day, I do like the feeling of allowing enough meaning to just organically seep into every action, so that it can be in the fullness of what it is without the expectation of it needing to be something in the next. And that's something that I've struggled with and I'm still working on. But my goodness, it certainly does feel good to be in that state.
Yeah. And it's hard not to grab onto it, especially when you're so frigging hungry sometimes, where you feel like you're in starvation mode. It's hard not to just wolf down the entire meal and go, I want it all. I want this to stay always like it is.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah. That's an illusion. And the truth is that I have such mad respect for you that the joy of choosing to interact with you in every specific moment allows my respect for you to grow, even if we disagree, even if we butt heads, because I know what I'm choosing, and I'm consciously choosing instead of obligatory staying connected to it.
Mm. Well, and I like another thing you keep saying to me is to trust myself. And particularly if we're repairing trust from traumatic former relationships or childhood, or both, learning to be able to reinvest that trust in ourselves is so fundamentally important, because if we know that we can trust ourselves in any given situation to act and respond in the way that is appropriate to us, then we can actually begin to trust the world again, because we know that we will show up for ourselves in the way that is appropriate in the moment with whatever is being put on the table.
Right. And it's also not approaching it with the naivete of a child.
Right.
I read something recently that talked about fairness. And it said, just because you're not going to eat the lion doesn't mean the lion ain't going to eat you. So it's really, really important to understand that fairness is not same for same. Fairness is about us having a safe container that is in and of ourselves, so that we can act in a way that's appropriate for us. That's it. And Sandy, you know what? I agree. She said, thank you, you're a great team. And I'll tell you that I'm going to brag on you for a bit, so just deal with it. I am very, very fortunate. Through my radio program and through doing workshops and talks all over the world, I get to work with some of the biggest names in the industry. And I've told her this before, but never in a public forum, I would hold her as great or greater than most, if not all of those minds and hearts and souls. I have such incredible respect for the brilliance that is Justice Bartlett. And that helps us work off of one another, at least for me. So
Thank you.
It's my honor.
And that feeling is mutual.
Cool.
Pleasure to share space with someone who is grounded and intelligent and articulate and compassionate. Deep pleasure.
Thanks. And here's another really funny thing. When I said all that stuff with Sandy, there may have been a time in that you said, Sandy, about justice. There may have been a time I was saying all that in the same way that somebody may say, I love you, really in the hopes that somebody's going to say, I love you back. But that's not it. That's not who I am, and that's not what that was meant to be. I had no expectation of reciprocation. And it was just a recognition of what I saw. It wasn't an offering in hopes or with a setup to get something back. And that's huge for us to recognize that distinction. Say what?
Well, that would be very shadowy.
Oh, baby, I got my shadows. Don't you worry about it. So I think y'all know, well, maybe y'all don't know, that we are doing these together. And ultimately, we are going to be doing a workshop outside of Bozeman, Montana, in late summer, early fall. And what's that going to be called?
Fire and Ice, dynamic bonding with life and each other.
Fire and Ice, dynamic bonding with life and each other. And it's just a pleasure. I got to tell you, your participation, you guys, adds so much more fullness and dimension to it. So I want to thank each one of you, even the ones who didn't say anything or write anything. It means a lot that you show up, because I know this of justice, and I certainly know this of myself. This is our passion. This is what we came in, one of the things that we came into the world to do. And you being here and or offering up is vital to that process. So much gratitude. Thank you.
I adore you, beloved community. Appreciate you showing up, appreciate your presence so much. I hope this has been as delightful and beneficial for you as it has been for us. I would invite you to please, if so inspired, share this video with your community. I will come back through afterwards and drop some links. Greg, you want to give these lovely folks ideas how to find you?
On social media, you could either just go to Greg Friedman, or you could go to Inner Journey Greg Friedman at gmail.com or gregfriedman.com. The show is broadcast from Laguna Beach Sunday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. and it's called Inner Journey with Greg Friedman. And I get to do Contact in the Desert in a little bit with Greg Braden. It just, I have a very blessed life, and it is dramatically enhanced by Justice's presence. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys can find me at illuminationwithjustice.com. You can friend me on social media. You can follow me on Elephant Journal. I write extensively there. I'm going to come back through. I'll drop links for Greg's website, for my website, for the radio show. I'll drop a couple of articles that might be pertinent and helpful to explore and deepen this conversation. And we will be doing this again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Hold it. I have one last thing to brag on you about. You have an article coming out in Radiance Magazine next month. Will you tease it a little bit?
Will I tease it a little bit?
Yeah.
So according to this man, it's one of the most beautiful things I've written, and he's read quite a bit of my work. I wrote about 150 words of it while sitting up on top of my favorite hillside and feeling Earth Mama presence, listening to her, feeling the wind and the sun on my body, and listening to the goats bleat off in the distance. And then I sent him about 150 message text, and he goes, "That's gorgeous. I can't wait to see what the article looks like." And I go, all right.
Oh, really? That's how we're framing it. Okay.
That's how it happened. Yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
So we were kind of supposed to have a byline, and I come home and I got inspired. Like, I channeled this shit. It's fucking sexy, guys. Like, why do we want a relationship with the divine masculine and feminine? Because we're sick of sterile structures. We're sick of mean gods. We're sick of worshiping stone buildings. We want to press our face to the breast of our mother and climb in the branches of our loving father. So 430 words later, I'm like, there you go, baby. I left 20 words. And in his graciousness, he went to his editor and said, "She wrote it. She deserves it. Thank you." This is my first time being published in paper, so I'm like fucking stoked and so appreciative, truly.
And it'll be online as well. And it really is. It's such a great article that you can't do anything but go, damn. All right, you guys, thank you again.